Have you ever wondered why, no matter how kind you are, you're still not respected? You bend over backward to be there for others. You smile when you're tired, say yes when your soul is screaming no, and try to hold the world together with your bare hands. You avoid conflict like the plague. You soften your voice, hide your anger, and offer patience even when you're running on empty. You've been told all your life that being a good person is the highest ideal, that kindness is a virtue, that if you're just honest, polite, and forgiving enough, the world will return the favor. But it hasn't, has it? Instead, you find yourself overlooked, dismissed, used. People take from you freely, your time, your energy, your attention, and rarely give anything back. And when you finally need something, silence. When do you speak up? You're too emotional. When do you draw a boundary? You're selfish. You start to wonder if the problem is you, if maybe you're just not good enough. But what if I told you this entire belief system, that goodness guarantees love, kindness earns respect, and sacrifice equals worth, is a lie? What if your kindness isn't protecting you, but slowly killing you? What if being a good person has become your prison? It's a bitter pill to swallow, but the truth is, your endless kindness may not be a reflection of your strength. It may be the mask you wear to survive, a socially acceptable disguise for fear. And if you keep clinging to that mask, one day you'll wake up and realize you don't even know who you are underneath it. Are you ready to face that truth? You probably don't even remember when it began. Maybe it started when you were a child, and someone praised you for being so well behaved. Maybe it was when you held back your tears because crying was called dramatic. Or when you were told to share your toys even if it didn't feel fair, because it's the nice thing to do. Slowly, you learned that your worth was tied to how agreeable, polite, and accommodating you could be. You weren't born trying to please everyone. You were conditioned into it. And so you adapted. You became the peacekeeper, the pleaser, the one who always says yes, even when every fiber of your being wants to scream no. You've learned how to read the room, how to shrink yourself, how to tiptoe around other people's feelings while ignoring your own. You've mastered the art of swallowing disappointment with a smile, of setting yourself on fire just to keep someone else warm. And the world claps for it. They call you a good person. But deep down, a quiet voice keeps asking, at what cost? The truth is, this isn't virtue, it's survival. It's not a strength, it's a wound, polished to look like sainthood. Psychologically, this is called adaptive behavior. As children, we adapt to gain love and avoid rejection. We build versions of ourselves that feel safer, more likable, more appropriate. But as adults, those versions can become prisons, masks we forget how to take off. And in the real world, these masks don't protect us, they expose us. Because here's the brutal truth. The world doesn't reward unconditional kindness. It rewards strategy. It rewards presence, power, clarity, and boundaries. Machiavelli saw it centuries ago. He wrote, "A man who wishes to act entirely good will come to ruin among so many who are not good." It's a sentence that should be etched into the minds of everyone who's ever thought that being endlessly selfless is the key to peace. It's not. In fact, in a world full of predators, being endlessly kind is like putting a free meat sign around your neck. Look around you. Have you ever noticed that the ones who get the most respect aren't necessarily the kindest, but the most assertive? The ones who know when to say no. The ones who don't flinch when challenged. The ones who aren't afraid to be disliked. But you've been taught to be the opposite. To keep the peace at all costs. To apologize when you've done nothing wrong. To explain yourself when silence would have been enough. You walk on eggshells, hoping your softness will inspire others to be gentle. But too often, it only invites them to push further. And still, you keep going. You keep saying yes, not because you want to, but because you're afraid of what happens if you don't. This is the emotional blackmail of false virtue. You think saying no makes you bad, that standing up for yourself makes you selfish. Taking up space makes it difficult. But none of that is true. What's true is this: your people-pleasing is not a personality trait. It's a trauma response. It's how you learned to feel safe in a world that didn't teach you how to feel seen. And unless you bring that to light, unless you unlearn the illusion that being endlessly kind equals being safe or respected, you will continue to be drained. You will continue to attract people who feed off your guilt, your availability, and your silence. You will continue to live someone else's definition of goodness and call it love. But love without boundaries is not love. It's self-abandonment. And the longer you cling to the idea that being a good person means being everything to everyone, the further you drift from the one person you need to show up for most, yourself. It's time to question everything you were taught about what it means to be good. Because maybe, just maybe, goodness isn't about how much you give. Maybe it's about how fiercely you protect your truth. Let's be honest. Most people aren't good because they're full of love. They're good because they're full of fear. It's not that you want to be endlessly accommodating. It's that somewhere deep inside, you're afraid of what might happen if you're not. You're afraid they'll leave, afraid they'll stop liking you, afraid they'll think you're selfish, cold, or too much. And so you shrink yourself, soften your voice, agree when you disagree, and smile through the ache. Not because you feel generous, but because you feel terrified. Terrified of being abandoned. Terrified of being seen. Terrified of not being enough. And you've learned to call that fear kindness. But let's be clear. Fear in disguise is not love. Carl Jung, one of the most profound minds in modern psychology, once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." This quote holds the key to understanding why your niceness is costing you your power. You think you're acting freely, from the goodness of your heart, but you're not. You're reacting from your wounds, from the stories you've never questioned, from beliefs so ingrained that you mistake them for your personality. You were taught that to be loved, you had to be likable. So you became likable, at the cost of your authenticity. You were taught that conflict meant rejection, so you avoided conflict, even when your silence betrayed your truth. You were taught that if you made other people happy, they would stay, so you made them happy, even when it made you disappear. This is what the unconscious looks like when it's running your life. It whispers, "Keep the peace, or you'll be alone." It shouts, "Say yes, or they'll hate you." And you listen, not because you want to, but because you don't know you're allowed not to. The mind has clever ways of dressing up fear. It tells you you're being understanding when you're actually afraid to disagree. It tells you you're compassionate when you're afraid to be honest. It tells you you're humble when you're actually terrified of being seen in your full power. And worst of all, it tells you this is noble, that your sacrifice is sacred, that your pain is the price of being a good human. But it's not noble. It's a learned coping mechanism. It's emotional camouflage. The result? A slow, silent erosion of self. You begin to forget what you like, what you need, what you believe, because everything you do is centered on what others expect. You get so used to performing a role that you lose touch with who's beneath the mask. And then you wonder why you feel invisible. Why do your relationships feel one-sided? Why does no one seem to care as deeply as you do? It's not because they're heartless. It's because you've trained them not to. You've trained them to believe you'll always be there, always say yes, always understand, always give. You've trained them to expect your silence, your support, your softness, and they never even asked you to. You just gave it out of fear. And now it's the price of your admission into their lives. That is not love. That is emotional submission. But here's the turning point. Once you see it, you can change it. Once you recognize that your kindness is often a mask for unresolved fear, you have the power to take it off. You have the choice to say, I'm done abandoning myself for the comfort of others. You can still be kind, but from strength, not fear. You can still be compassionate, but with boundaries, not blind obedience. You can still love deeply, but with your whole self intact, not hidden. Because the world doesn't need more people pretending to be kind. It needs people brave enough to be real. Jung believed that the journey of becoming whole, what he called individuation, begins when you stop projecting your fears onto others and start owning them. When you make the unconscious conscious. When you stop calling your pain fate and start calling it what it really is, a signal. A signal that your soul is tired of hiding. A signal that you've been living to be liked, but it's time to live to be whole. So ask yourself honestly, what would change if your kindness wasn't driven by fear? Who would you become if you weren't terrified of being misunderstood? What could you reclaim if you no longer needed to be seen as good to feel worthy? These are the questions that unlock freedom. And that freedom starts with facing the truth. At some point, you have to decide what matters more, being seen as good or being taken seriously. Niccolo Machiavelli wasn't interested in moral perfection. He didn't write for saints. He wrote for people who wanted to survive and lead in a world that rarely plays fair. In The Prince, his most infamous work, he dismantled the illusion that being good guarantees success. Instead, he argued for something far more unsettling: the strategic use of appearance. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. Think about that. We like to believe people judge us by our hearts, our intentions, our goodness, but the truth is, they don't. Most people respond to how you present yourself, not who you really are. Respect, trust, fear, admiration, these are reactions to perception, not purity. This is why nice people often finish last, not because they're weak, but because they seem weak. You can be the kindest person in the room, but if you don't project strength, clarity, or boundaries, you'll be taken advantage of. Not necessarily out of cruelty, but because you've communicated, whether you meant to or not, that you're easy to ignore. Machiavelli knew this. That's why he famously advised a leader to master two animals, the fox and the lion. The fox sees through deception. The lion commands fear. The fox knows how to move silently, observe closely, and adapt with intelligence. The lion doesn't ask for respect. It embodies it. It sets the tone without negotiation. And the secret isn't choosing one over the other. It's knowing when to be which. There are moments in life that demand your diplomacy, your empathy, your quiet understanding. That's the fox. But there are also moments that demand your roar. Moments when you must set a boundary so clearly, so unapologetically, that no one dares cross it twice. That's the lion. Most people, especially the nice ones, are stuck being the sheep, hoping the world will be gentle in return. But Machiavelli warns, the world doesn't reward sheep. It rewards those who know how to protect themselves. He wasn't advocating cruelty. He was exposing reality. Power isn't about domination. It's about positioning. It's about refusing to play small just to fit into someone else's comfort zone. It's about learning that being irreplaceable matters more than being liked. And that's the truth most people avoid. The successful ones? They're not always the most talented or the most moral. They're the ones who understand leverage, those who communicate value, who show, through presence and posture, that their time, energy, and respect must be earned. That's not arrogance, that's clarity. And clarity in a world addicted to performance is terrifying. You've been taught to feel guilty for being powerful, to feel ashamed for setting standards, to apologize for not being soft enough. But maybe it's time to stop apologizing and start strategizing, to recognize that being truly effective in this world means learning to balance heart with head, to be kind without being exploited, to be good and still command the room, because if you don't own your image, someone else will. And chances are, they'll use it to define you in a way that serves them, not you. So ask yourself, have you been a fox? Have you been a lion? Or have you just been trying to survive as a sheep? Machiavelli's message wasn't to abandon virtue. It was to stop mistaking virtue for passivity, to stop believing that goodness alone will save you. Sometimes, what you need most is not more kindness, but more strategy and the courage to use it. The world taught you to be nice. It didn't teach you how to be clear, and there's a big difference. Niceness says, I'll do whatever it takes to avoid conflict. Clarity says, I know what I will and won't tolerate. Niceness bends, overextends, apologizes, and accommodates, even when it hurts. Clarity stands grounded, steady, and self-respecting. If you've been conditioned to believe that saying no is selfish, cruel, or cold, it's time to rewrite that narrative, because saying no is not unkind. It's clear, it's honest, it's loving, especially to yourself. This is what it means to practice kindness with clarity, showing compassion without becoming a doormat, being open-hearted but not open to manipulation, setting limits without guilt, not because you're cold, but because you've decided to stop bleeding for people who wouldn't offer you a band-aid. Start with this truth: not everyone deserves access to you. Not your time, not your energy, not your forgiveness, not your silence. And one of the most liberating things you'll ever learn is how to say no without explaining yourself. Here's how that sounds in real life. No, I can't help with that. That doesn't work for me. I'm not available for this conversation right now. I don't feel comfortable with that request. No drama, no justification, no apology for having boundaries. You'll be amazed at how quickly people reveal their true nature when you stop being so available. Some will respect you more. Others will get angry, not because you've done something wrong, but because your self-respect interrupts their control. These are the people who only liked you when you were easy to use. Pay attention to them. The ones who guilt-trip you when you say no. The ones who only reach out when they need something. The ones who weaponize your kindness against you. These people don't love you. They love what you do for them. And if you're not careful, you'll confuse that dependence for connection. But connection requires mutuality, not a silent sacrifice. So, how do you protect yourself? You stop living to be liked and start living to be honest. You trade the exhausting pursuit of approval for the grounded power of authenticity. That's the shift. Authentic over nice. Because niceness is often a performance, a mask we wear to survive, to blend in, to be accepted. But authenticity is raw, unfiltered, rooted. It doesn't mean being rude or reckless. It means telling the truth, especially when it's uncomfortable. It means saying what you feel without sugarcoating it, showing up without shrinking, walking away without guilt. It means being fully you, not the version others prefer. And yes, this will cost you some relationships, but let them fall away, because anything that can't survive the presence of your truth isn't love. It's dependency dressed as loyalty. The more you honor your truth, the more your life will filter itself. The users will fade, the manipulators will recoil, and what remains will be real. You'll start to attract people who respect your no as much as your yes. People who don't expect you to abandon yourself just to make them comfortable. Because you weren't born to be agreeable. You were born to be authentic. So stop asking, will they still like me if I say no? Start asking, will I still like myself if I keep saying yes? That's the question that sets you free. Take a breath and ask yourself the one question you've avoided for far too long. Is your kindness protecting you or destroying you? You've worn the mask of the good person for years. Always available, always agreeable, always putting yourself last. You told yourself it was the right thing to do, that goodness meant sacrifice, silence, and swallowing your truth. But was it? Because beneath that smile is exhaustion. Behind your patience is a lifetime of suppressed rage. Under your gentleness is a person who's been taken for granted, time and time again, and still showed up. But showing up isn't the same as being seen, and being needed isn't the same as being respected. Let this sink in. You don't need to be good to be worthy. You don't need to contort yourself into a version of nice that makes others feel safe while you suffocate in silence. You don't need to earn your place in people's lives by being endlessly selfless, endlessly kind, endlessly harmless. That's not love, that's erasure, and the cost is too high. It's time to reclaim what your conditioning tried to erase: your power, your voice, your right to exist without apology. Because you can be kind and still be firm. You can be compassionate and still set boundaries. You can be loving without making yourself small to keep the peace. This is the shift. This is the moment you stop confusing approval with self-worth. You stop asking, "Do they still like me?" and start asking, "Do I still respect myself?" Because let's be clear, no one's coming to save you. No one's going to hand you permission to stop performing. No one's going to applaud you for finally saying, "That's enough." You have to be the one to decide, to choose honesty over harmony, reality over illusion, authenticity over acceptance. That means letting go of the fantasy that if you're just nice enough, patient enough, generous enough, people will treat you with the care you crave. The truth? Some won't. And that's not your failure, it's your freedom. Because once you stop begging to be seen, you start choosing to be real. Once you stop proving your goodness, you start embodying your power. And once you stop giving your soul to those who only take, you begin to build a life that reflects who you really are, not who you were trained to be. This is the rebirth. It won't be easy, but it'll be worth it. Because you'll no longer lie in bed wondering why you feel so invisible. You'll no longer tolerate the subtle manipulations, the guilt trips, the one-sided love. You'll look in the mirror and see someone who has finally chosen themselves, without guilt, without shame, without apology. So here's the moment of truth. You've been a puppet long enough. Now it's time to cut the strings. Cut the fear. Cut the obligation. Cut the need to prove your worth through suffering. And in the silence that follows, you'll hear something you haven't heard in a long time, maybe ever, your own voice, steady, certain, untamed, not begging, not performing, just being. Not good, not bad, just real. And in this world, that's the most powerful thing you can be. If this message resonated with something deep inside you, if it made you stop, reflect, or feel even a little less alone in your struggle, then don't let it end here. Subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Not just content, but wake-up calls. Honest, raw, and made for those who are done living on autopilot. And if there was a line, a moment, a truth in this video that hit home, drop it in the comments. Let us know what spoke to you. What did you realize? What will you no longer tolerate? Your story, your insight, your voice. It could be the spark that wakes someone else up, because you're not just watching. You're remembering who you are, and that is the beginning of everything.